Officer Derek Wilson stares in horror as Judge Amara Johnson enters the courtroom, the same black woman he had threatened to hang just yesterday, not knowing her position. His career flashes before his eyes as she recognizes him. Their gazes lock in silent confrontation. Before we dive into this shocking story of justice and accountability, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of truth seekers. Now let's see how this confrontation between a racist officer and the powerful judge he never saw coming unfolds. The automatic doors of Harrington's department store slid open as Amara Johnson stepped inside, the cool air conditioning a welcome relief from the sweltering Charleston summer heat. After a grueling day in chambers reviewing case files, she had decided to treat herself to some retail therapy. The upscale store in the historic district carried her favorite perfume, and she needed something to lift her spirits. Dressed in casual jeans, a simple blouse, and minimal makeup, Amara looked nothing like the formidable legal professional she was. That was exactly how she preferred it. Moments of anonymity were precious in her high-profile position. As she browsed through the luxury cosmetics section, testing scents on small paper strips, she noticed a store clerk watching her with unusual intensity. The young white woman whispered something to her manager, who glanced over with a frown. Amara had experienced this before, the assumption that a black woman in an expensive store must be up to no good. She took a deep breath and continued shopping, determined not to let it ruin her evening. Outside Harrington's, Officer Derek Wilson received a call on his radio as he patrolled the historic district in his squad car. Unit 4, we have a report of a suspicious person at Harrington's department store on King Street. Female, African American, approximately 35, wearing jeans and a blue blouse. Derek's lips curled into a slight smile as he responded. Copy that. Unit 4, responding. At 38, Derek Wilson had been with the Charleston Police Department for 15 years. His father had always told him that maintaining order meant keeping certain people in their place. It was a philosophy that had served him well throughout his career, even if he had to be more careful about how he expressed it these days. He parked his cruiser in the fire lane directly in front of the store entrance, a small but satisfying show of authority, and adjusted his utility belt as he stepped out. His hand brushed over his holster, a habitual gesture that reminded everyone who held the power. Inside, Amara had selected her perfume and was examining a pair of earrings when she felt a heavy presence behind her. Before she could turn, a gruff voice broke the peaceful shopping atmosphere. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some identification. Amara turned to find Officer Wilson standing uncomfortably close, his hand resting on his belt near his holster. His stance was wide, authoritative, and unnecessarily threatening. Excuse me? She asked, genuinely confused. May I ask why? Derek's eyes narrowed. We've had reports of suspicious activity in this store. Your identification, please. Around them, shoppers began to stare. Some quickly moved away, while others slowed their browsing, pretending not to watch while capturing snippets on their phones. The store manager hovered nearby, her face a mask of professional neutrality that barely concealed her discomfort. Officer, Amara said calmly, though her heart had begun to race. I'm simply shopping. I haven't done anything suspicious or illegal. I'd like to know what specific behavior has prompted this questioning. Something in her composed demeanor, her articulate speech perhaps, or the lack of intimidation in her voice, seemed to irritate Derek further. His jaw tightened. Listen, when a police officer asks for identification, you provide it. That's how it works. His voice carried through the store, intentionally loud enough for others to hear. Unless you have something to hide? Amara maintained her calm exterior despite the humiliation burning inside her. She'd spent her entire career navigating situations like this, though they never stung any less. I understand protocol, officer, but random stops without reasonable suspicion are unconstitutional. I'm simply asking for clarification. Derek stepped closer, invading her personal space. You people always want to play lawyer, don't you? He muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. The racial undertone wasn't lost on Amara. She'd heard variations of you people throughout her life, in school, in college, even in law school, and sadly, in courtrooms. She quietly slipped her hand into her purse and activated the recording function on her phone, keeping it hidden. "I'm not playing anything, officer. I'm exercising my rights as a citizen." "Rights?" Derek scoffed. "You should be more concerned about your responsibilities, like respecting authority." Customers continued to stare. A young black couple nearby exchanged knowing glances before quickly exiting the store. An elderly white woman shook her head in disapproval, though Amara couldn't tell if the disapproval was directed at her or at the officer's behavior. "I respect legitimate authority, officer, but respect is earned, not demanded through intimidation." Derek's face flushed red. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here. I can make things very difficult for you. One call, and I'll have backup here in 2 minutes. We can do this at the station if you prefer. I'll hang you in court if that's what it takes." The threat sent a chill down Amara's spine, but years of facing down intimidation tactics in the courtroom had prepared her well. She stood her ground, maintaining eye contact. "Are you threatening me, Officer Wilson?" she asked, noting his name from his badge. Derek noticed her glance at his nameplate and then spotted the subtle glow of her phone screen in her purse. His expression transformed from contempt to fury. "Are you recording me? That's illegal without consent." "Actually, in South Carolina, single-party consent is all that's required, and I consent to this recording," Amara replied evenly. Derek's hand moved toward her purse, but Amara stepped back. By now, the store manager had approached, her discomfort visibly escalating. "Is there a problem here?" the manager asked, her voice thin with tension. "No problem," Derek replied, his professional mask slipping back into place, though his eyes remained cold. "Just a routine check. This woman matches the description of someone reported for suspicious behavior." "I've been watching her shop," the manager said hesitantly. "She hasn't done anything unusual." The manager's lukewarm defense was typical. Not wanting to directly challenge authority, but uncomfortable enough with the situation to offer some intervention, Derek straightened up, adjusting his belt. "Well then, consider yourself lucky today," he said to Amara. "But a word of advice. When an officer asks for ID, provide it. Stay in your place, and we won't have any problems." The loaded phrase hung in the air between them as Derek turned to leave. He paused at the door, throwing one last glare in Amara's direction before exiting the store. The remaining customers quickly resumed their shopping, the uncomfortable moment passing like a storm cloud. The manager approached Amara with an apologetic expression. "I'm so sorry about that. Would you like to complete your purchase?" Amara's hands trembled slightly as she handed over her credit card. The perfume she'd been excited about minutes earlier now seemed trivial. As soon as she left the store, she called her colleague and friend, Sophia Martinez. "Sophia, it happened again," she said when her friend answered. "Amara? What happened? Are you okay?" Sophia's concerned voice came through the speaker. "Another officer, another random stop. But this one was worse. He threatened me. Said he'd hang me in court if I didn't comply. I have it recorded." "Oh my God," Sophia gasped. "Where are you? Do you want me to come get you?" "I'm heading to my car. I'll be fine," Amara assured her, though her voice wavered slightly. "But Sophia, I'm filing a formal complaint this time. Enough is enough." "You should," Sophia agreed firmly. "And given who you are, they'll have to take it seriously." Amara paused, watching as Officer Wilson's patrol car slowly drove past where she stood. He didn't look at her, but the message was clear. He was watching. "That's the thing, Sophia," she said, quietly. "He has no idea who I am." The elegant Georgian-style home in Charleston's historic Ansonboro neighborhood offered Amara Johnson a sanctuary from the world. As she entered through the front door, the familiar scent of lemon polish and old wood embraced her, but tonight it brought little comfort. "Marcus!" she called out, dropping her keys in the antique silver dish by the door. Her husband emerged from his home office, reading glasses perched on his nose. At 45, Dr. Marcus Johnson had the distinguished air that came from years. as one of Charleston's most respected dental surgeons. His face immediately registered concern when he saw Amara's expression. "What happened?" he asked, embracing her. Amara recounted the incident at Harrington's, her voice steady, but her hand still trembling slightly as she played the recording. Marcus's jaw tightened as he listened to Officer Wilson's threats. "This has to stop, Amara. You need to file a complaint. Use your position for once." "I'm going to," she replied, sinking onto their sofa. "But I didn't tell him I'm a judge. I wanted to see how far he'd go without knowing." "And now you know," Marcus said grimly. What Officer Derek Wilson didn't know, what would have made him think twice before threatening to hang Amara in court, was that Amara Johnson wasn't just any black woman shopping in an upscale store. She was Judge Amara Johnson, the first black female circuit court judge in Charleston County, appointed 3 years ago after a distinguished career as a prosecutor and civil rights attorney. Recently, she had been assigned to preside over a high-profile police misconduct case that had the department on edge. The timing of this incident wasn't lost on her. "Do you think it's connected to the Ramirez case?" Marcus asked, seemingly reading her thoughts. Amara shook her head. "I don't know, but even if it's not, it shows the culture we're dealing with." She closed her eyes, memories flooding back. Her father being pulled over repeatedly in their family's new car when she was a child. The security guard who followed her through stores when she was a teenager. The law professor who expressed surprise at her articulate arguments. The attorney who mistook her for a court clerk on her first day as a judge. Each incident had strengthened her resolve, hardened her determination to change the system from within. But tonight, she felt exhausted by the weight of it all. "I'm calling Thomas first thing tomorrow," she said, referring to Police Chief Thomas Reynolds, a reform-minded leader who had been working to change the department's culture since his appointment 2 years ago. "He'll want to handle this personally," Marcus said. The following morning, Amara sat across from Chief Reynolds in his office. At 56, Thomas Reynolds had the weathered face of someone who had seen too much but hadn't surrendered to cynicism. As a black man who had risen through the ranks during more openly hostile times, he understood Amara's experience on a personal level. "Judge Johnson, I can't express how deeply troubled I am by this incident," he said after listening to the CAO recording. "Officer Wilson's behavior is completely unacceptable." "It's not just about me, Thomas," Amara replied. "If he's willing to treat a well-dressed woman this way in an upscale store, imagine how he's treating people in less privileged circumstances." Reynolds nodded gravely. "I've assigned Captain Jamal Washington from Internal Affairs to investigate. He's one of our best, thorough and fair." "Will Officer Wilson remain on duty during the investigation?" "For now, yes. Without more evidence, the union would fight any immediate suspension." Reynolds sighed. "But I'm putting him on desk duty, away from public interaction." "I understand the constraints you're working under," Amara said, "but this officer shouldn't be carrying a badge and gun if this is how he conducts himself." After leaving the police headquarters, Amara felt conflicted. She had leveraged her position as a judge to ensure her complaint wouldn't be buried like so many others. Was that fair when countless other victims of police misconduct didn't have such access? Yet if she didn't use her influence to address these issues, what was the point of having it? Charleston presented a complex landscape for such matters. The city had elected a progressive government in recent years, with initiatives aimed at addressing its complicated racial history. Yet the police department, like many institutions, retained elements of old guard thinking that resisted change. Captain Jamal Washington reviewed Officer Wilson's personnel file with growing concern. Derek Wilson had been with the department for 15 years, with a record that looked impressive on the surface. Multiple commendations for bravery, consistent performance evaluations, and specialized training certificates. But digging deeper, Jamal found a pattern. 7 civilian complaints for excessive force or discriminatory behavior, all dismissed after cursory investigations. Most troubling were the demographics. 6 of the 7 complainants were people of color. Jamal also discovered something that hadn't made it into the official records. Derek's grandfather, William Wilson, had been a sheriff in neighboring Berkeley County during the segregation era, notorious for his harsh treatment of black citizens. This family history wasn't directly relevant to the investigation, but it provided context that Jamal found illuminating. As Jamal conducted his investigation, Derek Wilson was called into the office of his direct supervisor, Lieutenant Patricia Ramos. "Wilson, we need to talk," she said, gesturing for him to close the door. "There's been a formal complaint filed against you regarding an incident at Harrington's department store yesterday." Derek scoffed. That woman was being obstinate, refusing to comply with a simple ID check. "I was responding to a call." "The woman," Ramos interrupted, "was Judge Amara Johnson of the Fourth Circuit Court." The blood drained from Derek's face. "What?" "Yes, the same Judge Johnson who's currently presiding over the Ramirez police misconduct case." Derek sank into the chair across from Ramos, his mind racing. Judge Amara Johnson was well known in law enforcement circles, respected by many, feared by some, particularly those who had appeared before her in misconduct cases. She was known for her fairness, but also for her unwillingness to accept excuses for violations of citizens' rights. "She didn't identify herself," Derek said weakly. "Why would she need to?" Ramos countered. "She was shopping, not committing a crime. She was reported as suspicious." "By whom exactly?" "Because the store manager told Captain Washington she didn't call it in, nor did any of her staff." Derek fell silent, the implications hitting him. Someone had called in a false report targeting the judge, or he had initiated the contact without any actual call, which would make his actions even more problematic. "Internal Affairs is investigating," Ramos continued. "You're on desk duty until further notice. I suggest you contact your union representative." After leaving Ramos's office, Derek immediately called Michael Benson, the police union representative known for his aggressive defense of officers facing disciplinary action. "They've got nothing," Benson assured him after hearing Derek's version of events. "It's your word against hers unless she has actual evidence." Derek hesitated. She was recording on her phone. Benson's confidence faltered momentarily. "Audio only?" "Yes. That helps us. Audio can be misleading without context. We'll argue you were responding appropriately to perceived evasiveness. That doesn't come through in a recording." Derek wasn't entirely reassured. "She's a judge, Mike. Not just any judge. Amara Johnson." "I know who she is," Benson replied grimly. "And that's exactly why we need to fight this. She's got an agenda, Wilson. Always has. This is political, trust me." As the investigation proceeded, tension spread through the department. Some officers, particularly younger ones and officers of color, distanced themselves from Derek. Others closed ranks around him, seeing the complaint as an attack on policing itself. Derek found himself lying awake at night replaying the encounter. Why hadn't he recognized her? He'd seen Judge Johnson in the courthouse, though never in her courtroom, but dressed casually, outside of her professional context. She had just been another black woman to him, one he automatically viewed with suspicion. The realization made him uncomfortable, not because it revealed his prejudice, but because it had led him into a potentially career-ending mistake. Have you ever witnessed someone abuse their authority? How would you respond if you were in Amara's position? Comment number 1, if you believe she's right to pursue a formal complaint, or number 2, if you think she should let it go to avoid backlash. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories of justice and accountability. Now, as the investigation intensifies, just how far will Officer Wilson and his allies go to silence the truth? Captain Jamal Washington sat in the dimly lit video room of the Internal Affairs Division, reviewing security footage from Harrington's department store. The silent images confirmed much of Judge Johnson's account. Officer Wilson approaching her aggressively, standing too close, his body language unmistakably intimidating. "Can we enhance the audio?" Jamal asked the technician. "There isn't any," the young woman replied. "Store policy is video only, no audio, privacy concerns." Jamal nodded, disappointed but not surprised. The lack of audio meant they couldn't verify the most damning part of the incident, Officer Wilson's threat to hang Judge Johnson in court. It would be her word against his, and despite her position, Jamal knew how these cases typically played out. But then something unexpected happened. As news of the investigation spread, witnesses began coming forward. First was Eleanor Richards, a 67-year-old retired schoolteacher who had been shopping at Harrington's during the incident. "I heard everything," she told Jamal during her interview. "That officer was completely out of line. The way he spoke to her. I've lived in Charleston all my life, through segregation and beyond, and it took me right back to those bad old days." Then came Jason Torres, a college student who had captured part of the interaction on his phone while pretending to text. His recording didn't capture the "hang" comment, but did record Officer Wilson saying, "You people always want to play lawyer." Most surprisingly, Layla Henderson, a black security guard at Harrington's, came forward with her own account. "I've seen him do this before," she revealed to Jamal. "He comes in regularly, always seems to find a reason to question black customers, especially well-dressed ones, like he's personally offended by their presence." These testimonies strengthened the case, but Jamal knew they needed more to overcome the fierce defense the police union would mount. That's when the media caught wind of the story. "Judge harassed by racist officer," blared the headline in the Charleston Chronicle, the city's progressive-leaning newspaper. The story didn't name Officer Wilson due to the ongoing investigation, but it detailed the incident and referenced Judge Johnson's groundbreaking career. Within hours, the story went national. Cable news networks picked it up, fitting it into their preferred narratives. Some portrayed it as another example of systemic racism in policing. Others questioned whether the judge was playing the race card to further a political agenda. In response to the media attention, a local community organization called Justice Now organized a protest outside police headquarters. Hundreds gathered, holding signs that read, "Protect Black women," and "No one is above the law, especially those who enforce it." The protest was peaceful, but passionate, with speakers sharing their own experiences with racial profiling by police. Judge Johnson did not attend, maintaining professional distance from the public demonstrations. That evening, as Marcus Johnson was closing his dental practice, he received a phone call. "Dr. Johnson?" an unfamiliar male voice asked. "Yes, this is Dr. Johnson. Tell your wife to drop the complaint if you know what's good for your family." The line went dead before Marcus could respond. Shaken, he immediately called Amara, then the police. Chief Reynolds assigned a patrol car to their home and opened an investigation into the threat. When Amara told her mother about the threatening call, Elaine Taylor's reaction was immediate and visceral. "Drop it, Amara," the 70-year-old woman pleaded over the phone. "This isn't worth risking your safety, or Marcus's." "Mom, I can't just let this go," Amara replied. "You're not in the civil rights era anymore, but some dangers never change," Elaine insisted. "Your father would tell you the same thing." Amara thought of her father, who had marched with Dr. King and had the scars to show for it. Would he tell her to back down? She wasn't so sure. The following day, Amara met with Mayor Patricia Collins in her office overlooking Charleston Harbor. The mayor, a white woman in her 50s who had won on a platform of unity and progress, seemed genuinely disturbed by the incident. "Judge Johnson, I want to personally apologize for what you experienced," she said, her southern accent more pronounced when she was emotional. "It's unacceptable and doesn't reflect the values of our city or the direction we're trying to move." "I appreciate that, Mayor Collins," Amara replied, "but I'm concerned about the broader implications. This officer is still on the force, just moved to desk duty." The mayor's expression turned cautious. "The investigation is ongoing and there are procedures that must be followed. The police union has significant power, as you know, so publicly, you'll remain neutral. Until the investigation concludes, yes, I have to respect the process." Mayor Collins leaned forward. "But please know that privately, you have my complete support." Amara left the meeting understanding the political realities but disappointed nonetheless. Support that couldn't be expressed publicly was of limited value. Meanwhile, Officer Derek Wilson had been placed on administrative leave after the media coverage intensified. The department couldn't risk keeping him on duty, even at a desk with public scrutiny at such levels. Derek spent his days at home, alternating between anxiety and anger. His wife, Rebecca, tried to be supportive but grew increasingly concerned about his drinking and erratic behavior. "They're making an example of me," he told her after his third whiskey one evening. "I've given 15 years to this department, and they throw me to the wolves over one interaction." Rebecca chose her words carefully. "Derek, from what you've told me about what happened, maybe you did cross a line." "Whose side are you on?" he snapped, pouring another drink. As Derek's personal life deteriorated, the investigation took an unexpected turn when his partner, Officer Sandra Miller, requested a meeting with Captain Washington. Sandra, a 10-year veteran and one of the few Latina officers in the department, had worked with Derek for the past 3 years. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat across from Jamal in the Internal Affairs interview room. "What I'm about to tell you could end my career," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't stay silent anymore." Over the next hour, Sandra detailed a pattern of behavior she had witnessed. Derek targeting minority citizens for stops without clear cause, using racially charged language when no one else could hear, and bragging about intimidating troublemakers into compliance. "The worst part is, I said nothing," Sandra admitted, tears in her eyes. "I convinced myself it wasn't my business, that speaking up would make me a target. Every time I stayed silent, I betrayed my badge and my community." Her testimony was damning and detailed enough to be credible. Jamal knew it would be crucial to the case against Derek, but he also recognized the danger Sandra was placing herself in. "We'll protect your identity as long as possible," he promised, "but if this goes to a full hearing, you may need to testify publicly." "I understand," she replied. "I'm ready to face whatever comes." Word of Sandra's meeting with Internal Affairs spread through the department like wildfire, though the content remained confidential. That night, she found the word traitor spray-painted on her car in the precinct parking lot. The police union moved quickly to counter the growing case against Derek. Michael Benson held a press conference questioning Judge Johnson's objectivity in police-related cases, citing statistics that her rulings went against officers more often than other judges. "This complaint appears to be part of a pattern of bias against law enforcement," he claimed. "We're concerned that Judge Johnson is using this alleged incident to further a political agenda rather than seeking legitimate redress." The union's aggressive stance was bolstered by the revelation that Derek's father, Richard Wilson, was a wealthy real estate developer with significant political connections in Charleston. Richard had donated generously to several city council members' campaigns and had the ear of influential business leaders. As pressure mounted from both sides, someone anonymously leaked Judge Johnson's home address, phone number, and personal email online. She began receiving dozens of threatening messages, some merely insulting, others explicitly violent. Chief Reynolds assigned officers to guard her home and courthouse chambers, but the psychological toll was becoming evident. Amara looked tired, the stress visible in her eyes and the tension in her shoulders. During a late-night emergency meeting with Sophia Martinez and civil rights attorney Benjamin Clark, Amara voiced her doubts for the first time. "Maybe I should withdraw the complaint," she said, looking out the window of Benjamin's office at the Charleston nightscape. "The threats are affecting Marcus. My mother is worried sick, and I'm not sure what this is accomplishing." "That's exactly what they want," Sophia argued passionately. "To wear you down, to make the cost of seeking justice too high." Benjamin, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. "Judge Johnson, I've represented dozens of victims of police misconduct. Most never get this far because they lack your resources and position. If you back down now, what message does that send to them?" Amara turned from the window, her resolve visibly strengthening. "You're right. This isn't just about me anymore." "It never was," Benjamin replied softly. As the meeting concluded, none of them noticed the unmarked police car parked across the street, or the officer inside photographing everyone who entered and left the building. The case exploded across national media outlets with an intensity that surprised even Amara. On morning talk shows, cable news panels, and viral social media threads, her encounter with Officer Derek Wilson became a flashpoint for larger discussions about race, policing, and privilege in America. The hashtag #DasMart Justice for Judge Johnson trended on social platforms, with thousands sharing their own experiences of racial profiling. Celebrities and public figures weighed in, most supporting Amara, but some questioning her motives. Amara avoided social media and declined interview requests, maintaining professional distance from the public discourse. But she couldn't escape the headlines or the uncomfortable reality that her private ordeal had become a public symbol. "You've become the latest litmus test," Sophia told her over lunch in Amara's chambers, where they could speak freely without fear of being overheard. "People are reacting to what you represent, not who you actually are." Amara picked at her salad, her appetite diminished by stress. "I never wanted this spotlight. I just wanted accountability for one officer's actions." "It's beyond that now," Sophia replied gently. "Like it or not, you're carrying the weight of countless similar stories that never made headlines." As public interest intensified, Derek Wilson's supporters mobilized. A website appeared overnight defending him, highlighting his service record, and painting him as a dedicated officer being sacrificed to political correctness. The site included select portions of his performance reviews and statements from colleagues praising his professionalism. Conservative commentator Victor Daniels devoted a segment of his nationally syndicated radio show to questioning Amara's political agenda. "Judge Johnson has a history of anti-police bias in her courtroom," Daniels claimed, without providing specific examples. "Is it any wonder she'd interpret a routine police interaction as harassment? This is about advancing a narrative, folks, not about seeking truth." The narrative that Amara was pursuing a political agenda gained traction in certain circles, leading to intense scrutiny of her previous judicial rulings. Legal blogs and news sites analyzed her decisions in police misconduct cases, some finding evidence of bias, others praising her consistent application of constitutional principles. The Justice Now organization, energized by the national attention, organized a larger rally in support of Amara. Over 1,000 people gathered in Charleston's Marion Square, many wearing black robes in solidarity with the judge. Community organizer Tanya Lewis addressed the crowd through a megaphone. "When they come for one of us, they come for all of us. Judge Johnson stands for every black woman who has been treated as suspicious for simply existing in spaces others think we don't belong." The rally remained peaceful, though tensions rose when a smaller counter-protest organized by Back the Blue supporters gathered nearby. The two groups exchanged chants across a police barrier, but there were no physical confrontations. The polarization extended beyond public demonstrations. Charleston residents found themselves divided along increasingly racial lines, with family dinners, workplace break rooms, and social media feeds becoming battlegrounds for heated debates about the case. Amara tried to maintain her normal routine despite the chaos swirling around her. She continued presiding over her docket, though she had recused herself from all police-related cases to avoid any perception of bias. But the strain was showing. She lost weight, developed insomnia, and jumped at unexpected noises. The situation escalated when Amara received a death threat directly to her chambers. A court clerk discovered an envelope containing a crude drawing of a hanging judge in a black robe, with Amara's name written beneath it. Chief Reynolds immediately increased security at the courthouse, assigning armed officers outside her courtroom and escorting her to and from the building. The FBI was brought in to investigate the threat, treating it as a potential federal crime against a judge. As law enforcement agencies scrambled to address the escalating situation, Police Chief Reynolds found himself caught in an impossible position. The city council, influenced by the police union, pressed him to conclude the investigation quickly with minimal disruption to the department. Meanwhile, community activists demanded decisive action against Derek and a broader examination of departmental culture. During a tense meeting with the mayor and city council members, Reynolds defended his handling of the case. "This investigation will be thorough and fair," he insisted. "I won't be rushed to judgment in either direction, regardless of political pressure." Councilman James Harrison, whose campaign had received significant funding from Derek's father, pushed back. "The department's morale is suffering, Chief. Officers feel they can't do their jobs for fear of being the next Derek Wilson. If officers are following proper procedures and treating citizens with respect. They have nothing to fear," Reynolds replied firmly. As the meeting adjourned, Mayor Collins pulled Reynolds aside. "Thomas, we need to find a resolution soon. This situation is tearing the city apart." Her words carried an unspoken suggestion. Find a compromise, something that would allow both sides to save face. Reynolds understood the political calculation, but couldn't bring himself to agree. Justice isn't about compromise, Mayor. It's about truth. While the political maneuvering continued, Captain Jamal Washington made a disturbing discovery. When reviewing evidence submitted to Internal Affairs, he noticed that Judge Johnson's phone recording, a copy of which had been provided to the department, had been corrupted. The file contained only static where Officer Wilson's most damning statements should have been. Suspicious, Jamal began checking other evidence in the case. The security footage from Harrington's had been edited, with several minutes missing from the timeline. Someone within the department was tampering with evidence, and Jamal had a sinking feeling he knew who was responsible. That evening, as Jamal returned to his apartment, he found Assistant Chief Gregory Barnes waiting in the parking lot. Barnes, a 30-year veteran who had been passed over for the chief position in favor of Reynolds, had made no secret of his resentment toward the reform-minded leadership. "Taking your work home with you, Washington?" Barnes asked casually. "Just being thorough," Jamal replied, immediately on guard. "The Wilson case is sensitive. Lots of careers at stake. Sometimes it's best to let things cool down, find a middle path." "Is that a suggestion, sir?" "Let's call it friendly advice from someone who's seen how these things play out." Barnes smiled, but his eyes remained cold. "Ambitious officers know which battles are worth fighting." After Barnes left, Jamal immediately called Chief Reynolds to report the encounter and his discoveries about the tampered evidence. Reynolds listened gravely before issuing a directive. "Document everything. Trust no one outside our immediate team. And Jamal, watch your back." Meanwhile, at the Johnson home, Marcus confronted a man taking photographs of their house from a parked car. When challenged, the man claimed to be a freelance journalist but sped away without providing identification. The incident left Marcus shaken. Later that night, he and Amara had their first serious argument about the case. "This has gone too far," Marcus insisted. "Our safety is at risk. Your career could be affected." "If I back down now, nothing changes," Amara replied, her voice strained but determined. "They win. The next person this happens to won't even try to seek justice. Is changing the system worth risking your life? Our life together?" Amara had no answer that would satisfy both her conscience and her husband's fears. As tensions mounted, Sophia made an unexpected discovery while researching the police union's finances for a separate case. She found significant donations from Wilson Developments, Richard Wilson's company, to the union's legal defense fund, dating back several years. More troublingly, she uncovered a connection between the police union president and Mayor Collins' last campaign, raising questions about the mayor's claims of neutrality. The web of connections surrounding Derek Wilson and the efforts to protect him grew more complex by the day, suggesting that more than one officer's career was at stake. What had begun as a single incident of racial profiling was revealing a deeper system of protection and privilege that had operated in the shadows of Charleston for years. The date for Derek Wilson's disciplinary hearing was set for 2 weeks from the incident, a timeline that felt both too soon and not soon enough. The hearing would determine whether Derek would face termination or lesser disciplinary action for his conduct toward Judge Johnson. In a tactical move that surprised no one, Derek's attorney filed a motion to have the hearing closed to the public, citing concerns for officer safety amid the heated public discourse. The request sparked immediate backlash from transparency, advocates, and community organizations. For Amara, the approaching hearing created a professional dilemma. As a sitting judge who regularly presided over cases involving the police department, she was now in an impossible position: recuse herself from all police-related cases indefinitely, or risk appearing biased against law enforcement officers who appeared in her courtroom. After consultation with the Judicial Ethics Committee, Amara reluctantly decided to temporarily recuse herself from all cases involving Charleston police officers. The decision effectively removed her from nearly 30% of her docket, creating a significant burden on her colleagues and slowing the wheels of justice. "They've managed to sideline me without firing a shot," she told Sophia bitterly. "Even if we win this case, they've limited my effectiveness as a judge." The growing pressure transported Amara back to her childhood in North Charleston, to a memory she had carried with her throughout her legal career. She was 8 years old when her father, James Taylor, was pulled over while driving their family home from church. The officer had claimed their car matched the description of one used in a robbery, though the only real similarity was that both vehicles were driven by black men. Her father, a high school mathematics teacher respected throughout the community, had been handcuffed and made to sit on the curb while officers searched their car. She remembered her mother's quiet terror, her own confusion, and most vividly, her father's humiliation as neighbors drove past, witnessing his degradation. No contraband was found, no charges filed, but the damage was done. That night, her father had explained to her that some people would always see his skin before seeing his humanity. "But that's their failure, not mine," he had told her. "And someday, people like you will change things." That memory had fueled Amara's determination through college at Howard University, through Harvard Law School, through her years as a prosecutor and civil rights attorney, and finally to the bench. Now it strengthened her resolve to see this case through, despite the cost. Benjamin Clark was preparing diligently for the disciplinary hearing, gathering witness statements and legal precedents. At 52, Benjamin had spent his entire career fighting civil rights cases, often against the police. He knew the playbook their opponents would use and was determined to stay several steps ahead. "They'll attack your character," he warned Amara during a preparation session. "They'll scrutinize every ruling you've made involving police officers. They'll suggest you orchestrated this confrontation to advance a political agenda." "None of that is true," Amara replied. "Truth is only part of the equation in these proceedings," Benjamin said grimly. "Perception matters just as much. We need to be prepared for everything they'll throw at us." As the legal teams prepared their cases, the community continued to divide along increasingly racial lines. Black churches throughout Charleston held prayer vigils for justice and healing. White community leaders called for calm and fairness. The space between these positions grew wider each day. The police union's threat of a blue flu, a coordinated sick-out by officers in protest, hung over the city like a storm cloud. If enacted, it would leave Charleston dangerously understaffed during the height of tourist season, potentially creating a public safety crisis. Mayor Collins, increasingly concerned about the political and economic fallout, privately pressured Chief Reynolds to find a compromise solution. "Thomas, the city can't afford this division," she insisted during a closed-door meeting. "Find a way to discipline Wilson that acknowledges wrongdoing but doesn't destroy his career. A suspension, additional training, something." "And what message does that send?" Reynolds countered. "That threatening a black woman, a judge no less, merits a slap on the wrist? That racism is acceptable as long as it's not too public?" "I'm thinking about the greater good," the mayor replied defensively. "Sometimes justice has to be balanced against practicality." Reynolds left the meeting troubled by the political pressure, but more determined than ever to ensure a fair process. As the investigation continued, Amara made a disturbing discovery while reviewing patterns of complaints against the police department. She found that complaints filed by people of color against white officers were dismissed at a rate of 93%, significantly higher than the national average. When she cross-referenced the dismissals with the investigating officers, Assistant Chief Barnes's name appeared with alarming frequency. Meanwhile, Captain Jamal Washington faced escalating harassment from fellow officers. His case files were tampered with, his parking space was vandalized, and the word rat appeared on his locker. Despite the intimidation, he continued to build the case methodically, uncovering more witnesses to Derek's pattern of discriminatory behavior. The night before he was scheduled to present his findings to Chief Reynolds, Jamal returned home to find his car windows smashed and a note on the windshield that read, "Back off or next time it's not the car." The intimidation tactics extended to other witnesses as well. Sandra Miller, Derek's partner, who had testified about his pattern of behavior, found her home vandalized with racial slurs. As a Latina officer who had crossed the thin blue line, she faced hostility from both sides, ostracized by fellow officers while still viewed with suspicion by community activists. In a surprising development, Amanda Wilson, Derek's wife, reached out to Amara through her attorney, requesting a private meeting. Against Benjamin's advice, Amara agreed to meet her at a neutral location, a small coffee shop in North Charleston, far from the media's watchful eyes. Amanda, a petite woman with tired eyes, seemed nothing like the defiant spouse Amara had expected based on her public statements supporting Derek. "I needed to apologize to you," Amanda said after they had settled at a corner table. "What Derek did, it wasn't right. It wasn't the first time either." "Why are you telling me this?" Amara asked cautiously. Amanda stared into her untouched coffee. "Because I'm afraid of what he might do. His temper. It's gotten worse since all this started. He talks about you constantly, blames you for everything." The revelation chilled Amara. "Have you spoken to the police?" "Who would I talk to? They're his brothers. Besides," Amanda lowered her voice further, "there would be consequences if he knew I came here." The implication hung heavily between them. Amara carefully slid her card across the table. "If you ever feel unsafe, call this number. Anytime, day or night." Amanda quickly pocketed the card and left shortly after, looking over her shoulder. As she exited, the night before the hearing, tensions in Charleston reached a breaking point. Chief Reynolds had caught wind of potential unrest and increased police presence throughout the city. The mayor issued a statement calling for calm and respect for the administrative process. At home, Amara stood at her bedroom window, watching a police cruiser slowly circle their block for the third time that night. The officer was there for her protection, but the sight brought little comfort. Marcus joined her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said softly, "I'm proud of you for seeing this through." Amara leaned back against him, drawing strength from his presence. "I keep thinking about what my father would say if he were here. He'd say you're changing things, just like he predicted." Marcus kissed her temple gently. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." But rest wouldn't come easily. As she finally drifted towards sleep, Amara's mind filled with images of courtrooms and confrontations, of her father sitting handcuffed on a curb, of Amanda Wilson's frightened eyes, and of all the people who had filed complaints that disappeared into administrative black holes. Tomorrow wouldn't just be about one officer and one judge. It would be about whether the system could truly deliver the justice it promised. What would you do if you witnessed an officer abusing their power? Would you speak up like Sandra Miller, knowing the risks, or stay silent to protect yourself? Comment number 1, if you believe most people would have the courage to come forward, or number 2, if you think fear would keep them quiet. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're invested in seeing justice prevail. Now, as the disciplinary hearing begins, will the truth finally come to light? Or will powerful forces bury it once and for all? The morning of the disciplinary hearing dawned with an electric tension hanging over Charleston. News vans lined the street outside police headquarters, and crowds began gathering early. Supporters of Judge Johnson on one side, Back the Blue demonstrators on the other, kept apart by barricades and state police officers brought in specifically to maintain order. Inside the building's largest conference room, 3 tables were arranged facing each other. The disciplinary panel would sit at the head table. Assistant Chief Gregory Barnes, who had been appointed chair despite Chief Reynolds's private objections, Captain Lisa Turner, one of the department's highest-ranking black officers, and Lieutenant Robert Chen, who headed the department's community relations unit. Benjamin Clark arrived early with Amara, entering through a back entrance to avoid the media gauntlet. They settled at their assigned table, arranging documents and preparing for what promised to be an exhausting day. "Remember," Benjamin whispered, "this isn't a court of law. The rules are different, the burden of proof is lower, and the panel has extraordinary discretion. We need to be perfect." Amara nodded, her expression serene despite the knot in her stomach. Years on the bench had taught her to mask her emotions, to present a calm exterior regardless of the turmoil within. Today, that skill would be tested to its limits. Marcus and Sophia took seats in the small area reserved for observers, along with several community leaders and journalists granted access, despite the attempt to close the proceedings. Chief Reynolds stood at the back of the room, his presence sending a clear message that he was watching the process closely. At precisely 9 o'clock, Derek Wilson entered with his attorney, Michael Benson, and a coterie of supporters including his father, Richard Wilson, whose influence in Charleston was evidenced by the respectful nods he received from several city officials present. Derek wore his dress uniform, medals prominently displayed, a visual reminder of his service record. Outside, the opposing crowds grew louder, their chants occasionally penetrating the room's thick walls. "No justice, no peace," competed with "Support our police," creating a discordant backdrop to the proceedings. Assistant Chief Barnes called the hearing to order, his deep voice cutting through the tension. This disciplinary hearing is convened to determine whether Officer Derek Wilson violated departmental policy during an incident on July 12th at Harrington's department store involving Judge Amara Johnson. I remind everyone that this is an administrative proceeding, not a criminal trial. Barnes's emphasis on administrative wasn't lost on Benjamin, who whispered to Amara, setting expectations low right out of the gate. Barnes continued, "Officer Wilson is entitled to representation, due process, and a fair hearing. Judge Johnson, as the complainant, will present her account, which will be subject to questioning. All relevant evidence will be considered by this panel before we reach a determination." Michael Benson immediately rose, straightening his expensive tie. "Before we proceed, I wish to enter several objections to this process." He launched into a lengthy challenge to the hearing's legitimacy, questioning everything from the timeline to the composition of the panel. Barnes allowed the objections to continue for nearly 20 minutes before finally cutting Benson off. "Your objections are noted for the record, Counselor. Now, let's proceed with testimony." Amara was called first. She took her place at the witness table, swore to tell the truth, and began recounting the incident in the calm, methodical manner that had made her an effective judge. She described entering the store, being approached by Officer Wilson, his increasingly aggressive behavior, and the explicit threat he had made. "He leaned in close to me," she recalled, and said, "I'll hang you in court if that's what it takes. Given this country's history of racial violence, particularly lynching, I took this as both a threat and a racist intimidation tactic." The room fell silent at her words. Even Derek's supporters seemed momentarily taken aback by the explicit description of the threat. Benjamin methodically walked Amara through the aftermath, her recording of the incident, filing the complaint, and the subsequent harassment she had experienced. Throughout her testimony, Amara remained composed, her judicial training evident in her precise language and emotional control. Then came cross-examination. Michael Benson approached with a predatory smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Judge Johnson, you've had quite a bit of media attention from this incident, haven't you?" he began. "I haven't sought any media attention," Amara replied evenly. "But you haven't discouraged it either. Quite convenient for someone with political ambitions." Benjamin objected immediately. This line of questioning assumes facts not in evidence and attempts to impugn the witnesses' motives without basis. "Sustained," Captain Turner said before Barnes could respond. "Counselor, stick to relevant questions about the incident." Benson shifted tactics. "Judge Johnson, in your testimony, you claimed Officer Wilson threatened you. Yet the recording you provided doesn't include this alleged threat, does it? As I've stated, the file was corrupted when it was transferred to the department. I have the original on my phone, which I've offered for forensic examination." "How convenient," Benson replied with theatrical skepticism. "A mysterious technical glitch affecting only the most damning portion of your recording." For the next hour, Benson continued his aggressive questioning, attempting to portray Amara as politically motivated, suggesting she had engineered the confrontation to advance an anti-police agenda, and questioning why she hadn't identified herself as a judge during the encounter. "Perhaps," he suggested, "you were setting a trap for Officer Wilson, waiting for him to make a mistake you could exploit." "No," Amar replied firmly. I was simply shopping when approached by an officer who immediately treated me with suspicion and hostility based, I believe, on my race. After Amara's testimony concluded, the store's security footage was shown. The silent images confirmed much of her account regarding Wilson's aggressive posture and physical intimidation. But without audio, the most serious allegations couldn't be verified. The absence of audio is significant, Benson argued. We're being asked to terminate an officer's career based on unsubstantiated claims about words that cannot be proven. Next came Derek Wilson's testimony. In his uniform, with his service record visible on his chest, he presented a striking figure of authority and respectability. I responded to a call about a suspicious person, he began, his voice steady. When I approached Judge Johnson, though I didn't know her position at the time, she immediately became defensive and uncooperative. Did you request identification? Barnes asked. Yes, sir. Standard procedure for investigative stops. And did you provide a reason for the stop when asked? I explained we had received a call about suspicious activity. She refused to comply and became argumentative. Did you use the phrase, "I'll hang you in court"? Captain Turner asked directly. Derek's expression registered practiced shock. Absolutely not. I would never use such language. What I said was that her obstruction could result in charges that would need to be resolved in court. She misheard or deliberately misinterpreted my words. Throughout his testimony, Derek maintained this position, that he had followed procedure, that Judge Johnson had been uncooperative, and that any perception of racial bias was a misinterpretation of standard police work. His demeanor was respectful, his answers concise, his regret at the misunderstanding apparently sincere. Several character witnesses followed, including Derek's former black partner, who testified to never having observed racist behavior during their 2 years working together. Each painted a picture of a dedicated officer, committed to protecting all citizens regardless of race. Just when it seemed the momentum had shifted decisively in Derek's favor, Sandra Miller was called to testify. The room tensed as Derek's current partner entered, visibly nervous but determined. Officer Miller, Jamal Washington began, conducting this portion of the questioning. How long have you worked with Officer Wilson? 3 years next month, she replied, avoiding eye contact with Derek. During that time, have you observed Officer Wilson conduct stops or interactions with civilians in a manner similar to what Judge Johnson described? Sandra hesitated, glancing briefly at Derek, whose expression had hardened. Yes. Multiple times. Could you elaborate? Over the next 20 minutes, Sandra detailed a pattern of behavior. Derek targeting minority citizens without clear cause, using racially charged language when no other officers could overhear, and bragging about keeping certain people in line. Last month, she recounted, he stopped a black businessman driving an expensive car. Afterward, he told me, those people need to remember they're still guests in certain neighborhoods. Derek's face flushed with anger as his partner's testimony continued. His attorney passed him notes, presumably urging him to maintain his composure, but the damage was evident in the panel members' expressions, particularly Captain Turner, who leaned forward with increasing interest as Sandra spoke. When Benjamin cross-examined Sandra, he focused on establishing her credibility. Officer Miller, why are you testifying today, knowing the potential consequences to your career? Because it's the right thing to do, she answered simply. I became an officer to protect and serve everyone equally. Staying silent makes me complicit. Michael Benson's cross-examination was brutal, suggesting Sandra had personal grudges against Derek, questioning her own record, and implying she was currying favor with the department's new leadership. Throughout the aggressive questioning, Sandra remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. As the hearing progressed through additional witnesses, tensions in the room continued to rise. Benjamin raised the issue of witness intimidation, presenting evidence of threats against both Sandra Miller and Captain Washington. These witnesses have faced significant harassment for coming forward, he argued. This pattern of intimidation raises serious questions about departmental culture and attempts to obstruct this investigation. During a brief recess, as panel, members left to confer privately, A court clerk approached Amara and discreetly handed her a folded note. "This was just delivered for you, Judge Johnson." Amara opened it cautiously. In typed letters, it read, "Check your email now. Subject, truth." While Benjamin conversed with Captain Washington, Amara quickly checked her phone. The email contained no message, only an attachment labeled Harrington's Audio MP3. With trembling fingers, she downloaded the file and pressed play, listening through her earbuds. The audio quality was poor, but unmistakable. Derek Wilson's voice clearly saying the words she had reported. "I'll hang you in court if that's what it takes." Amara immediately showed the email to Benjamin, who wasted no time approaching Chief Reynolds. After a brief conference, Reynolds nodded gravely and spoke to the panel members as they returned from their break. The hearing was dramatically reconvened, with Chief Reynolds addressing the panel. "New evidence has come to light that is directly relevant to these proceedings. I request that it be admitted immediately." The conference room fell silent as the newly discovered audio file played through the speakers. Despite the mediocre quality and background noise, Derek Wilson's voice came through with chilling clarity. "I'll hang you in court if that's what it takes." Derek's face drained of color. He stared at the speakers as if they had betrayed him, then whispered urgently to his attorney. Benson immediately leapt to his feet. "I object to the introduction of this evidence. It wasn't part of the original complaint file. It appears mysteriously at the 11th hour, and we have no way to verify its authenticity. For all we know, it could be manufactured." Assistant Chief Barnes seemed inclined to agree, but Captain Turner interrupted. "The recording directly addresses the central issue of this hearing. We should admit it and allow for expert analysis if authenticity is questioned." Lieutenant Chen nodded in agreement. "I concur. The evidence is too relevant to exclude." Outvoted, Barnes reluctantly allowed the recording to be entered into evidence. "We'll note the defense's objection for the record." Derek's composure, maintained throughout the proceedings until now, began to crack. He whispered more animatedly to Benson, who tried to calm him without success. "This is a setup," Derek suddenly shouted, rising from his chair. "That recording is fake. She's been out to get me from the beginning." "Officer Wilson," Barnes warned, "control yourself or you'll be removed." But Derek was beyond warnings. Months of stress, fear, and simmering rage erupted as he pointed accusingly at Amara. "You think you're untouchable because you're a judge? You people always play the race card when you don't get your way." The outburst hung in the air, the racial animosity behind his words now undeniable. Derek seemed to realize his mistake immediately, but it was too late. The damage was done. Benson requested a 15-minute recess, which was granted. As Derek was led out by his support team, Chief Reynolds approached the panel. "In light of this new evidence and Officer Wilson's behavior, I'm initiating a separate criminal investigation into civil rights violations and potential obstruction of justice. I've already contacted the district attorney's office." This announcement sent ripples of shock through the room. What had begun as a departmental disciplinary matter was now expanding into potential criminal charges. The stakes had risen dramatically. During the recess, Captain Washington discreetly approached Amara in the hallway. "Judge Johnson, there's something you should know. Assistant Chief Barnes attempted to suppress evidence in this case. He's the one who corrupted the original audio file." "How do you know this?" Amara asked. "I set a trap," Jamal admitted. "I created duplicate evidence files with invisible watermarks. The corrupted file had Barnes's digital fingerprints all over it." This revelation explained much about the resistance they'd encountered, but raised an even more troubling question. How far up did the corruption go? In the hallway outside the conference room, Barnes was seen making an urgent phone call, his body language tense. Minutes later, Richard Wilson, Derek's father, arrived at the building and demanded a private meeting with Mayor Collins, who had just arrived to observe the proceedings. As the various parties maneuvered, Amara was approached by Diana Johnson, no relation, the executive director of the National Coalition for Police Accountability. "Judge Johnson, what's happening here in Charleston resonates far beyond your city limits," Diana explained. "We've documented similar patterns in departments across the country. Your case could set a significant precedent if you're willing to work with us." The opportunity to create broader change appealed to Amara, though she knew any such collaboration would have to wait until the current proceedings concluded. Meanwhile, Sophia had been conducting her own investigation into the surveillance operation targeting Amara. Using contacts in the tech community, she had traced the source of the leaked personal information to a computer within the police department, specifically to the terminal in Assistant Chief Barnes's office. As the recess neared its end, Michael Benson approached Benjamin with an unexpected offer. "We're prepared to resolve this matter without further proceedings," he said quietly. "Officer Wilson will resign effective immediately, with no admission of wrongdoing, in exchange for Judge Johnson dropping all complaints and agreeing to confidentiality." Benjamin relayed the offer to Amara, who considered it briefly before shaking her head. "This isn't just about me anymore. If he resigns quietly, he could join another department and do the same thing to someone else. No deal." When the hearing reconvened, an unexpected witness requested to testify. Calvin Reed, a 72-year-old black security guard who had been working at Harrington's for over 20 years. "I saw the whole thing," Calvin testified, his voice steady despite his age. "I've watched Officer Wilson harass black customers for years, but I never spoke up because I needed my job. But when I saw him do it to a woman who turned out to be a judge, well, I figured if she's brave enough to stand up, so am I." Calvin's testimony corroborated Amara's account in every detail, including the exact wording of Derek's threat. His years of witnessing similar incidents established a pattern that couldn't be dismissed as a misunderstanding or isolated event. Following Calvin's testimony came another surprise. Officer Jason Roberts, Derek's previous partner who had left the force 2 years earlier. Initially called as a character witness for Derek, Jason instead revealed that he had requested a transfer specifically because of Derek's behavior toward minority citizens. "I couldn't be part of it anymore," Jason admitted. "The department's culture made it easier to leave than to report it. I'm not proud of that decision." As the day's testimony concluded, the panel announced they would recess until the following morning to deliberate and render their decision. The tension in Charleston continued to build overnight, with both protest groups growing in size and local businesses closing early in anticipation of potential unrest following the ruling. That evening, as Amara and Marcus ate a quiet dinner, at home under police protection, they discussed the potential outcomes. "Even if we win," Amara said, "this is just the beginning. The system that protected Derek all these years is still in place." "One battle at a time," Marcus reminded her. "Today's victory makes tomorrow's possible." Across town, Derek sat alone in his home office, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at his service weapon. The career he had built, the identity he had constructed around his badge, was crumbling. His father had assured him that connections in high places would protect him, but the unexpected recording had changed everything. For the first time, Derek faced the possibility that his actions would have consequences. Overnight, while Charleston slept uneasily awaiting the hearing's conclusion, Captain Jamal Washington and Sophia Martinez worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence of a larger conspiracy within the department. Using departmental records and financial documents obtained through a contact in the city comptroller's office, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. Complaints against certain officers, including Derek Wilson, had been systematically buried for years. The complaints predominantly came from minority citizens in wealthy neighborhoods or business districts, areas where Richard Wilson, Derek's father, had significant real estate investments. He's been using his son and other officers to police. Who has access to these areas? Sophia realized. Keeping undesirables away from his properties to maintain their exclusive image. The financial connections ran deeper. Bank records showed payments from Wilson Developments to a shell company that, when traced, linked back to Assistant Chief Barnes. The payments were disguised as consulting fees, but the timing corresponded with dismissed complaints against Derek and other officers in Richard Wilson's apparent influence network. Around 2 in the morning, as Jamal was compiling this evidence in his office, the door suddenly burst open. 4 uniformed officers entered, 2 with hands on their weapons. "Captain Washington, you need to come with us," one stated flatly. "Under whose authority?" Jamal demanded, discreetly pressing the emergency button under his desk. Assistant Chief Barnes. He wants to see you immediately. Before Jamal could be removed, Chief Reynolds appeared in the doorway, alerted by the emergency signal. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The officers looked confused, caught between conflicting chains of command. "Sir, Assistant Chief Barnes ordered us to bring Captain Washington to his office for questioning about evidence tampering." Reynolds' expression hardened. "Return to your posts. Captain Washington isn't going anywhere. If Barnes has questions, he can address them through proper channels." After the officers left, Reynolds revealed to Jamal that he had been building his own case for months. "When I took this position, I knew there were problems, but I needed proof. I've been gathering evidence against corrupt officers and their outside enablers, waiting for the right moment." "Why didn't you tell me?" Jamal asked. "The fewer people who knew, the safer the investigation. But after what happened today, we need to move quickly. Barnes and his allies will be desperate." That same night, Amara received an anonymous package at her home, delivered by private courier rather than regular mail to bypass the surveillance on her house. Inside was a USB drive containing recordings of police officers planning how to discredit her, conversations that included Assistant Chief Barnes, Derek Wilson, and several other officers. "We need to make her look political," Barnes could be heard saying. "If we can paint her as an activist judge with an agenda, anything she says about Wilson gets dismissed as bias." The recordings also included discussions of the surveillance operation against her and plans to intimidate witnesses. Most disturbing was Barnes's admission that he had personally corrupted the audio evidence from Amara's phone. Amara immediately contacted Benjamin and Chief Reynolds, who advised her to bring the evidence directly to the State Attorney General's office, rather than risk it being intercepted within the local justice system. Morning brought new tensions to Charleston. As Marcus drove to the hearing, he noticed a black SUV following him. Rather than heading directly to police headquarters, he took evasive action, eventually losing the tail before calling Amara to warn her. At police headquarters, state police had taken over security from local officers, a decision made by the governor after consulting with Chief Reynolds. The building was locked down, with everyone entering subjected to enhanced screening. The media presence had grown overnight, with national networks setting up live broadcasts. The crowd of protesters had swelled into the thousands, the dividing line between opposing groups maintained by a heavy police presence. Inside, Amara arrived escorted by state police officers. Benjamin met her at a side entrance, updating her on overnight developments. "The State Attorney General is on his way," he informed her. "Reynolds has been feeding him information for weeks, building a RICO case against Richard Wilson and his network within the department." When Derek arrived with his legal team, he appeared surprisingly confident despite the previous day's damning evidence. His father entered shortly after, nodding to several officials as if everything were proceeding according to plan. Assistant Chief Barnes was noticeably absent from the panel. Lieutenant Samuel Davis, a state police officer appointed by the governor, had taken his place. Due to potential conflicts of interest that have come to light, Assistant Chief Barnes has been recused from these proceedings, Chief Reynolds announced as the hearing reconvened. Michael Benson immediately objected to the panel change, but was overruled. As he prepared to present what he called new evidence of judicial misconduct, the doors opened to admit the State Attorney General, Eleanor Phillips, accompanied by FBI agents. Benson forged ahead despite the high-profile interruption, presenting a series of photographs purporting to show Judge Johnson at various political rallies and protests. "These demonstrate a clear bias against law enforcement that should disqualify her complaint," he argued. Benjamin immediately responded, "Those images are doctored. Judge Johnson was not present at any of those events, and we can prove it with her documented whereabouts during each date in question." A digital forensics expert quickly confirmed Benjamin's assertion, demonstrating how Judge Johnson's face had been superimposed onto another woman's body in each photograph. The revelation created an uproar in the hearing room. As this drama unfolded, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Richard Wilson had attempted to enter the secure area with a concealed weapon, triggering the security screening. State police officers immediately took him into custody, further throwing the proceedings into chaos. Attorney General Phillips approached the panel. In light of developing information regarding potential criminal activity, I'm requesting a brief recess to address this body regarding a broader investigation that directly impacts these proceedings. The panel agreed, and when the hearing reconvened, 30 minutes later, Phillips addressed the room. The state of South Carolina has been conducting a joint investigation with federal authorities into corruption within the Charleston Police Department and related civilian conspiracies to obstruct justice and violate civil rights. She continued, "This morning, we executed search warrants at multiple locations, including Assistant Chief Barnes's residence and offices belonging to Wilson Developments. Based on evidence already obtained, we are expanding this investigation to include charges of conspiracy, witness intimidation, evidence tampering, and civil rights violations." The announcement landed like a bombshell. Derek Wilson visibly paled, while his attorney frantically scribbled notes. Several officers present exchanged worried glances, uncertain where the expanding investigation might lead. Attorney General Phillips turned her attention directly to the panel. "While my office doesn't have authority over your administrative proceedings, I strongly urge you to consider the broader implications of your decision. This case is no longer about a single incident, but about systemic corruption that has undermined public trust in law enforcement." With the state's highest legal authority essentially endorsing Amara's complaint, the panel's path seemed clear. They retired to deliberate, leaving the hearing room buzzing with speculation about how far the corruption investigation would reach and who might be implicated. During the deliberation, Chief Reynolds approached Amara. "I want to apologize personally for what you experienced and for the harassment that followed. You exposed something that needed to see daylight at great personal cost." "I had a position of privilege that protected me," Amara replied. "Most victims of police misconduct don't have that advantage." Reynolds nodded soberly. "Which is why systemic change is long overdue. Regardless of today's outcome, I hope you'll work with me on police reform initiatives moving forward." After 2 hours of deliberation, the panel returned. The room fell silent as Lieutenant Davis prepared to announce their decision. Based on the testimony presented, the evidence submitted, and in accordance with departmental policy regarding conduct unbecoming an officer, this panel unanimously finds that Officer Derek Wilson violated multiple sections of the Charleston Police Department Code of Conduct. The pronouncement echoed through the hushed room. Lieutenant Davis continued, reading from the formal statement. "Officer Wilson's actions demonstrated racial bias, abuse of authority, dishonesty in official matters, and conduct that brings discredit upon the department. Furthermore, his subsequent attempts to intimidate witnesses and obstruct the investigation constitute additional violations." Captain Turner then delivered the panel's decision. The panel recommends immediate termination of Officer Derek Wilson's employment with the Charleston Police Department, revocation of his law enforcement certification, and referral to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges. For a moment, absolute silence filled the room. Then, like a dam breaking, reactions erupted. Derek's supporters gasped and protested, while Amara's advocates nodded in grim satisfaction. Chief Reynolds immediately accepted the panel's recommendation, making the termination official. Derek's reaction was swift and frightening, his face contorted with rage as he stood, shouting over the commotion. "This is a lynching, a politically motivated witch hunt." His voice broke with emotion as he pointed directly at Amara. "You'll regret this, all of you will regret this day." As Derek lunged toward the judge's table, security officers quickly restrained him, but the damage to his case was done. His outburst, captured by the media present, revealed the very temperament and racial animus that Amara had described in her complaint. Michael Benson, looking defeated, requested a moment to confer with his now former client, but Derek shrugged him off, still struggling against the officers escorting him from the room. Chief Reynolds stepped forward to address the assembly as Derek was removed. "Today marks a beginning, not an end. Officer Wilson's behavior reflects failures in our recruitment, training, supervision, and accountability systems. Effective immediately, I am announcing a department-wide review and reform initiative." The chief detailed plans for implicit bias, training, community oversight boards, and transparent complaint procedures. The trust between our department and the communities we serve has been broken. Rebuilding that trust begins with acknowledging the problem and taking concrete steps toward change. As the hearing concluded, Amara found herself surrounded by reporters on the courthouse steps. Rather than dodging questions, she decided to address the media directly, knowing her words would reach far beyond Charleston. Justice should not be exceptional. It should be expected, she began, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. What happened to me happens to countless citizens who lack my position and platform. They experience harassment, intimidation, and discrimination, but their complaints go unheard or uninvestigated. She continued, looking directly into the cameras. Today's decision is just one step toward accountability in one department. Real justice requires systemic change, not just removing individual officers who abuse their power, but transforming the cultures and structures that enable and protect them. Her words resonated nationally, becoming a rallying cry for police reform, advocates and a lightning rod for criticism from those who viewed the case as an attack on law enforcement broadly. In the months that followed, Charleston became ground zero for debates about policing, race, and accountability. Derek Wilson faced a criminal trial where Amara testified about her experience. The evidence uncovered during the expanded investigation left little room for doubt about his guilt or the broader conspiracy. Derek was convicted of civil rights violations and sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. Assistant Chief Barnes and several other officers faced charges ranging from evidence tampering to conspiracy. Richard Wilson was indicted for bribery, witness intimidation, and racketeering. The officers who had courageously testified against their colleagues, including Sandra Miller and Jason Roberts, faced difficult career decisions. Some remained with the department under Reynolds' reform leadership, while others moved to different jurisdictions or left law enforcement entirely. Amara established a foundation to provide legal support for victims of police misconduct, particularly those without resources to pursue complaints effectively. The foundation also funded research into best practices for police accountability and community oversight. Mayor Collins, whose careful neutrality had been revealed as tacit support for the corrupt system, faced significant backlash. In the next election, she was defeated by Dr. Elijah Turner, a reform candidate who had been a vocal supporter of Amara throughout the ordeal. 6 months after the hearing, Amara received a call from the governor's office. The state Supreme Court had a vacancy, and her handling of the Wilson case, her courage in pursuing justice despite intense personal cost, had brought her to the governor's attention. After careful consideration and discussion with Marcus, Amara accepted the nomination. Her confirmation hearings were contentious, but ultimately successful, with many citizens testifying about her fairness and integrity on the bench. On her final day as a circuit court judge, before assuming her new position on the state Supreme Court, Amara visited her father's grave. James Taylor had passed away 5 years earlier, never seeing his daughter reach this height in her career. Standing before the simple headstone, Amara spoke softly. "You were right, Dad. Things are changing, slowly, imperfectly, but changing nonetheless. I'm part of that change now, in ways I never imagined." She placed fresh flowers beneath his name, remembering his words from that long ago night after he had been humiliated by police in front of his family. "That's their failure, not mine, and someday people like you will change things." As she drove to Columbia to be sworn in as the newest justice on the South Carolina Supreme Court, Amara reflected on the journey that had brought her here. What began as a routine shopping trip had exposed corruption, sparked a movement, and ultimately elevated her to a position where she could influence the interpretation and application of law throughout the state. In the courtroom, where the swearing-in ceremony would take place, a young black girl sat in the audience with her parents, watching wide-eyed as Amara took her oath. Their eyes met briefly across the crowded room, the established justice and the child who might someday follow in her footsteps, a silent acknowledgement that while progress had been made, the work of justice was an ongoing struggle, passed from one generation to the next. As Amara placed her hand on the Bible and swore to uphold the Constitution, she silently added her own personal pledge. to use her position to ensure that the law's protection extended equally to everyone, regardless of race, status, or circumstance. The path forward would not be easy, but as her father had taught her long ago, justice was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. What did you think of Judge Amara Johnson's journey from victim of racial profiling to state Supreme Court justice? Has this story changed your perspective on speaking up against injustice? Comment below with your thoughts on the most powerful moment in this story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this message of courage and accountability. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey. Remember, real change starts with brave individuals willing to stand up for what's right, even when it's difficult. This powerful story reminds us that systemic change begins with individual courage. Judge Amara Johnson could have remained silent about her experience of racial discrimination, protecting her comfort and career. Instead, she chose to challenge a deeply entrenched system, despite the personal cost. The narrative illustrates how racism often operates through everyday interactions, supported by institutional protection. One officer's bigotry revealed an entire network of corruption that had victimized countless others who lacked Amara's position and resources. We learned that accountability requires both personal bravery and collective action. Neither Amara alone, nor the community organizations alone could have achieved justice. It required their combined efforts along with allies within the system, like Chief Reynolds and Captain Washington. The story demonstrates that progress, while difficult and often met with fierce resistance, is possible. Institutions don't change overnight, but through the persistent efforts of those committed to justice and equality. Perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that privilege comes with responsibility. Amara used her position not just to seek personal vindication, but to create pathways for others to find justice, recognizing that true change must benefit those most vulnerable to discrimination.